Mobile Planning Commission. I would like to take a moment to review our general operating procedures. Our meeting is divided into two sessions, the public hearing session and the deliberation session. In the public hearing session, an application or group application on the agenda is called. The applicant makes his or her presentation. Commission members ask questions, if any. Members of the public make their comments. Only 4 may speak for an agenda item and 4 against. Each speaker is limited to 5 minutes, subject to questions by the commission. After 4 minutes, a loud beep will indicate 1 minute left to speak. And at this point, please summarize your comments. After all opposition speakers have finished, the applicant will be given time to respond. If you do intend to speak, please come to the podium, speak into the microphone, and give your name and address for our minutes. Please direct all comments to the commission only and not to the applicant or the audience, and please remember to speak directly into the microphone. On routine applications, the applicant may simply raise his or her hand if there are no objections to the staff recommendations. I will announce then that the applicant is in full agreement with those recommendations. If there are any questions, the applicant will be given an opportunity to respond. After hearing all applications, the commission will go into deliberation session. The commissioners discuss each application with input from the staff as necessary, but with no input from the audience. The commissioners then vote on each application, and the results of voting can be learned from the planning department. If some issues arise in the deliberation session that were not addressed in the public hearing, the chairman has the discretion either to allow additional comments pertaining to those issues in order to resolve them, or call for the application to be held over for discussion at a future meeting. Occasionally, one or more commission members may recuse themselves from discussing and voting on a given application. A recusal does not necessarily mean the member is directly involved with the application or the applicant. Depending upon the circumstances, ethical rules may require a recusal when there is only the slightest appearance of a conflict of interest. If a regular member recuses, a supernumerary will vote in their stead unless both supernumeraries are already voting due to absences. The Planning Commission makes final decisions subject to appeal on subdivisions, planning approvals, and plan unit developments, PUDs. The Planning Commission only makes recommendations on zoning applications, with the City Council making the final decision. Please turn off or silence all cell phones at this time. Commissioners and staff, please remember to turn on your microphone when speaking. Roll call. Myself, Carlos Gant, here. Miss Libby Latham.
Here.
Mr. John Vallis.
Here.
Ms. Shirley Sessions.
Here.
Mr. Thomas Doyle.
Here.
Mr. Taylor Atchison.
Here.
Ms. Keena Andrews.
Here.
Mr. Nick Omberger.
Here.
Ms. Bess Rich.
Here.
Mr. Don Humbry.
Here.
Mr. Alan Cameron. We have a quorum. We'll begin with our extensions. Item number 1, 901, 903, and 911 Dolphin Street and Broad Street, Lone Oak Subdivision.
Jerry Bird, Bird Surveying Company for the applicant. I know this has been extended 2 times before, but I am told they just need a little extension past this time of expiration on it, and they plan on finalizing it this time. Subdivision and utilizing the existing PUD that we've asked for extension on.
Mr. Bird, are you asking for an additional year extension, or do you have a shorter length of time you're asking to extend?
Extension on?
The extension you're asking for? You said a little bit more time.
Yeah.
Can you quantify that a little bit?
They didn't have time for completion before this approval ran out, so we've asked for an extension, and they should be finalizing, I think, in the next 2 months.
Okay. Thank you.
How many?
Any other questions from commissioners?
How many meetings do you want this laid out for? Is that what he's asking?
Yeah, you asked for a
Yeah.
year extension or 6 months?
Yeah,
Year.
it's been here.
But you're going to get it finished sooner than that.
Sir,
But you expect to have it wrapped up sooner than that?
So you've had already 2 one-year each extensions? Because this is the 3rd time, or was there a calendar on the last one?
I think that is correct, that this is the 3rd time, and I wasn't involved with the first one, but I'm told that they're ready to finalize it.
Does the staff know if this is actually now going into, this, if we do it for another year, it would be 3 years of an extension? Because that is unusual.
These applications first came before the commission in 2015, and they have been extended.
For each, the other
It's a
times
year
were a year
extension.
each. And you say that the applicant is saying to you that they feel within 2 months that they'll be ready to proceed?
I think 2 to 3, that they will have the subdivision recorded, which will in fact dedicate additional widening for Broad Street.
Do
for
we,
those
does the
plans.
planning commission by law have to give 1-year extensions, or can it be a calendar date?
I don't believe that question has come up recently, but within the subdivision regulations and the zoning ordinance, extensions are for a year.
I do think part of this extension, this last 3rd year, has had some to do with coordinating with the efforts of the redevelopment of Broad Street through the Tiger Grant and understanding what land is going to be needed for right-of-way and things of that nature is part of what's kind of taking it a little longer, is my understanding.
Right.
That is correct. There has been coordination, so that is correct.
Let me add this. A couple of months ago, when they had their last application before the commission, I think it was to amend the PUD and subdivision. At the mayor's request, I met with the applicant to make sure that, to discuss the issues that were presented in the last staff report. They withdrew that application after our discussion. Instead of holding it over again, I think that one had already been held over 2 times. They decided to withdraw it and kind of go back and come up with a master plan, which included discussions with the city about the Broad Street widening. So they're working with the city, trying to get everything done according to the new standards and what the city wants.
Any other
Question?
questions by commission?
Yeah, I have a question for staff. Was there an issue with the fence initially as it was installed, and has that since been resolved?
As far as I know, the 2 houses on Contest Street, the neighbor to them did not want them zoned. This is not including them as far as zoning. And the one on Dolphin Street, a building on Dolphin Street, it does not include that. That was a major issue, is they didn't want it, and it's not in there.
And
I think what Ms. Andrews may be referring to, I seem to recall too that the fence that's been installed on that property is in the right-of-way in some locations.
On Broad Street?
Yeah, on
I
Broad
thought
Street in
I
particular.
remembered.
And I think,
The black ornamental fence?
yes.
Yes, and that will be set back to the right-of-way line.
But to date, it has not been corrected, is that?
Oh, no. Well, they still on the land
Mr.
until the
Doyle?
subdivision plat's recorded.
But that was a condition on the commission's approval, and if extended, that condition would still remain in place.
And
That's-
when a extension is requested, surrounding neighbors don't get any knowledge that this is going on, correct?
No,
There's no
It goes back
notice.
to the original request is when they're notified.
Any other questions by commissioners? Anyone else here to speak for this Anyone here to speak against? Thank you. Item number 2, 3740 Latigo Road, Bellwood subdivision. It's recommended for a 1-year extension. Is the applicant present?
I'm Donald Wilkins and live at 31047 Spanish, Oakley Drive, Spanish Fort. Developers telling me that they're had a little bit of issue developing cost in the organization to get this done, but it should be done within the next few months.
All right. Thank you, sir. Any questions by commissioners? Anyone else here to speak for this? Anyone here to speak against? Thank you. Moving to our holdovers, item number 3, 3100 Cottage Hill Road. Ms. Latham is recused. It's recommended for tentative approval. Is the applicant present? Are you in agreement with staff recommendations? Yes, ma'am. Applicant is present and in agreement with staff recommendations. Is there anyone here to speak for this? Anyone here to speak against? Thank you. Item number 4, 956 Mobile Street. All parts are recommended for approval. Is the applicant present?
I believe Leonce Williams at 1012 Mobile Street.
It's recommended for approval. Are you in agreement with the staff recommendations?
Yeah. So then it is well.
Okay.
Thank God. Thank you very much.
Is there anyone else here to speak for this? Anyone here to speak against? Thank you. Item number 5, 3726 Halls Mill Road. Both parts are recommended for tentative approval. Is the applicant present? Are you in agreement with staff recommendations? Yes. Applicant is present and in agreement. Is there anyone else here to speak for this? Is there anyone here to speak against? Thank you. Let's try to keep celebrations down to a minimum. Item number 6,
Mr.
7
Chairman.
Garden Trace. It's recommended for withdrawal.
Mr. Chairman, we received an email from the agent requesting the withdrawal.
Okay. This item has been withdrawn. New subdivision applications. Item number 7, south side of US Highway 90, Blast Coat Research Products subdivision. Recommended for tentative approval. Is the applicant present? Are you in agreement with staff recommendations? Applicant is present and in agreement. Is there anyone else here to speak for this? Anyone here to speak against? Thank you. Item number 8, east side of Liberty Drive, East Newman Crossing subdivision. Recommended for tentative approval. Is the applicant present? Are you in agreement with staff recommendations? Applicant is present and in agreement. Is there anyone else here to speak for this? Anyone here to speak against? Thank you. Item number 9, 11595 Taylor's Drive, Taylor East Ridge subdivision. Recommended for tentative approval. Applicant is present and in agreement with staff recommendations. Is there anyone else here to speak for this? Anyone here to speak against? Thank you. Item number 10, 156 South McGregor Avenue, Perry Place subdivision, recommended for tentative approval. Applicant is present and in agreement. Is there anyone else here to speak for this? Anyone here to speak against? Thank you. Item number 12. 5715 I-10 Industrial Parkway, I-10 Industrial Park subdivision, recommended for tentative approval. Applicant is present and in agreement. Is there anyone else here to speak for this? Anyone here to speak against?
Who was the applicant on this application? I didn't see him raise their hand. Okay, Brett. Okay. And this is item number 11, I-10 Industrial Park subdivision. Correct.
Pizzo, which
Oh, it's
paper you
number
on?
12 on page 16.
The agenda's incorrect. It's number 11 is number 12
Mr.
on the
Chairman,
agenda.
if I may, if you'll notice on the agenda, on the bottom of the preceding page, it put a 12, or excuse me, it put the 11 for this particular number item, but then it didn't put the particular agenda item to the next page, and then it assigned it a 12. So the numbering on the agenda is out of sequence with the numbering in your packet and on the overhead. I apologize.
Next item, how about that? Will be the northwest corner of Cypress Business Park Drive, Shipyard Road, Bluffs at Cypress Creek. It is recommended for holdover. Is the applicant present? Are you in agreement with the holdover recommendation till the August 16th meeting?
Zeke Hudson with Rowe Engineering. Just go over some of the items that were requested as the cause of the holdover. One being an application fee. Is that, am I misreading that?
Yes. At the northeast corner, the triangular piece,
Yes.
you did not include that. It needs to be included as it was shown on the initial plan, and it's all part of this property. If that creates the need for additional notification, we're required to send that out certified, and we would need that additional notification and label fee from you.
Okay.
Why doesn't he come down?
The original subdivision, there's a phase 1 of Bluffs at Cypress Creek. Do they have interest in that? There was roughly, I think, 48 lots in that subdivision that have a vested interest in that common area. I think it's our understanding that that piece of property is probably mislabeled and should have been labeled as a part of the phase 1 on the original subdivision recording.
So this is not under the same ownership?
I don't believe that's correct. There's a There was a phase one that was recorded.
To the west.
Yes, ma'am. And this is a new proposed. That was, this area on the original subdivision plat was shown as phase two that was never approved, never recorded.
And that common area was included as part of that phase two that was never recorded. On our plats that we have, and in looking at the record plat for phase one, that common area was not included in phase one. It was shown as part of phase two.
All right.
So right now it's kind of hanging out there.
Okay, I'm with you. Thank you. Yeah, we would like to do the holdover.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else here to speak for this? Anyone here to speak against? However, when this does come up on the 16th meeting of August, you also have that opportunity. Thank you. Next item, 7901 Half Mile Road, the retreated Half Mile subdivision, recommended for tentative approval.
Brett Orrell with Poly Surveying. The only item I wanted to look to possibly amend is item number 2. In lieu of dedication, there's currently an 80-foot right-of-way here. My client would like to ask that a setback be imposed from the center line of that road, minimum of 75 feet. You know, we could do a little more. These are big lots, so they're going to sit off the road more than that. So if 100 was more in line, we would be okay with that. I don't see that as a major deal. But in lieu of dedication, we would like to provide a setback that meets any future widening, but we'd be open to, 100 feet from the center line, which would basically be a 50-foot setback from the current property line.
From which street?
From Half Mile Road. So the main run of 1 through, that.
I see that now.
Whole
Thank
section.
Does the road currently have an 80-foot right-of-way? Is that
yes,
what
that's what we currently show. Lot 8, it still would not be a problem, just based on the sheer size. If we dedicate an additional 25 feet from what's shown, that lot is, it shouldn't impact. We've got another 100 foot of developed, and this is in the county. It'll be septic.
I see a county engineer here. I hate to put him on the spot, but can he speak to any plans for widening of that roadway? Or does he know? I mean, if he doesn't know, that's fine, but is that anything? I'm not aware of any at this time. Okay, thank you.
Good answer. Any other questions by commissioners? Anyone else here to speak for this? Anyone here to speak against? Thank you. New planning approval applications, 853 Dolphin Street, Dagny Development, Taylor Atchison and Libby Latham recused. It's recommended for tentative approval. The applicant present. Are you in agreement with staff recommendations? Applicant is present and in agreement with staff recommendations. Is there anyone else here to speak for this? Anyone here to speak against? Thank you. New plan unit development applications, 4658 and 4660 Airport Boulevard, Balloon Park subdivision, recommended for tentative approval. Is the applicant present?
Jerry Bird, Bird Surveying, for the applicant. The only thing is, number 1, demolition of the car wash that's on there. Yes, it is an inoperable car wash, but it's still a good building. They don't really want to tear it down. And yes, I've utilized the 4 spaces. I mean, it's inoperable. It's like carport. I use those for parking places. But I don't know why staff wants to tear it down, and the owner just really doesn't want to.
Any questions by commissioners or comments from staff?
I have a question. With the car wash, is there any derelict equipment still attached to any of the walls in the bays?
I don't know.
So that it still has the appearance of a car wash too?
I was out there. I didn't pay that much attention. I don't know if there's, that center section is where the tanks are that hold the soap and all. I didn't go in there. I don't know if there's any equipment still in the building.
Hoses hanging down and stuff like that as well.
Can I ask a question? What kind of building is it other than what you can see from the road? And I've driven down by it. It just is an old-fashioned car wash. It looks like a canopy, and it's in very, very bad shape.
Well,
this is an opportunity to tighten up the area, because with the buildings in the rear, I don't even know how they ever even got, but that's neither here nor there, because they're very much there, but they get a lot of use, and you need the circulation.
Well, of course, self-service car washes are basically a box. I mean, the end walls, roof, center.
Are they concerned that there has some kind of mitigation that they'll have to do? Is that a concern that they might have if they tear it down?
I don't know if they ever plan on putting it back in there, but of course, tearing it down is an expense. I mean, I guess if the city wanted to go in and take it down, that would be okay.
I was really glad to see it as part of the plan unit development, because it's just everything's so kind of tacky back there, and that's the worst thing.
We're also dealing with 2 owners. One owner owns the front building, which is where that this all came about, converting it, and the other owner is willing to participate and allow the crossover parking to
because you wouldn't make code. What about, okay, let me understand, the building that's going to be a bar, according to the application, is the old retail plaza that the side is up on Airport?
Yes.
And people are going to be backing out, isn't it like?
There's a driveway that leads down in. Yes, they'll back out into that driveway. They don't back out into Airport Boulevard, into the service road of Airport Boulevard. They don't have to.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But.
All right.
Mr. Byrd, if they were to leave it, if the commission were to decide to let you leave it, is the applicant planning on doing anything to make that place look better? Because right now it is an eyesore. I think we can agree on all that. It's pretty ugly right now. So.
They're not going to touch it.
I don't know that he has any plans. Bad enough on the large building. I mean, I did view that one. There's about 4 businesses possible, I'm not sure, that's in there, and a lot of other vacant storefronts. Maybe if he did improve it, maybe it would rent. I don't know.
So you're going to use some of that canopy area for parking, but the applicant does not want to tear it down. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
You need it for parking, though? Or
yes. I mean, parking stalls, those wash stalls are large enough for a car to park inside of them.
It's kind of, I've gotten calls about it, and from somebody who, I don't think it's part of this development, where the exercise used to be. I'm not even sure they're still in there. There was a bakery at one time, an exercise, not in this portion of it, but everybody kind of comes through that area, and people were concerned about security issues with that thing, because you can kind of hide behind it, and it's just, besides being an eyesore.
It's also kind of like hiding behind a 6-foot privacy fence that's required by the planning commission.
Right, but this is smack in the middle of everything that's going on in this footprint. Thank you.
Just want to clarify, you're proposing that
Gotta go.
an inoperable lighted car wash serve as 4 spaces for this development?
Yes, it's like a carport.
Thank you.
Needs to go.
I mean, it got a roof over it.
That's very good. I gotta give you credit.
He's doing a good job, but I don't think he's having much luck.
You get brownie points. I'm sorry.
Any other questions from commissioners? Anyone else here to speak for this? Anyone here to speak against?
Here we go. This is bad back there.
My name is Frank Callaghan. I own the property directly in front of this car wash that's actually part of this development. The car wash now, I can comment on it.
Could you give your address?
Say again.
Could you give your address for the records, for the minutes?
My personal address? 6314 Doleve Court, Daphne, Alabama, 36526.
Thank you, sir.
All right. And currently, we're developing the old Mexican restaurant into retail space that I think will be an asset to that section of Airport Boulevard, as opposed to the 6 or 8 years that it's been just a derelict building. Now, part of that will entail redoing the parking lot. Right now, access to that back strip is currently we're being used as an access to that back parking area. I think that the demolition of the car wash, right now, I don't even think it's got a roof on it. Plus the fact it has now attracted a school bus, an old school bus that a derelict is living in, with a hose strung across from one of the adjacent properties. I don't think this is in keeping with what you want for neighborhood development.
Thank you.
Now, as far as the circulation is concerned, I am very concerned that you have a single access into this property through the road. You're including parking that is at an angle against the building, and when you take the measurement from those parking spaces to the property line on the adjoining property, you don't have enough room for 2 cars to pass. How you'll ever get safety vehicles, police cars, fire trucks down that road even if a couple cars are parked in those angled parking places? I think that the staff has minimized the concerns about the ingress and egress to this property as far as how it's going to work. I just don't see how it can. It seems like it's an insurmountable flaw to the development the way it's stated. Now, I'm not opposed to people developing their property, although I think that 10,000 square foot bar is not exactly a normal neighborhood thing. We already have our neighborhood strip club, so I think that we don't need to expand that. And that's on a personal basis, but I think that from the realistic proposal, I don't see how you're going to have a traffic pattern that'll ever work when you've only got a single access to the property, and part of the property parking that's going to be used is going to reduce the width of the usable space. And there's no other exit to the property.
Are we aware how big that area is between the parking space and the property line?
Say again?
You commented that at the end of the parking space between that and the property line is not large enough for 2 vehicles to pass. Do you know how wide that area is?
Well, we went out there and parked a car in one of the parking spaces, and at where the sign is on the post, you couldn't even get one past it. Now, the sign obviously could be taken down, but it still boils down to the fact that the way those parking spaces are angled, it implies that the only thing you're going to do is back up, and then you're going to have to go down and turn around and come back out, because there's not room enough to turn around between the parking space and the property line. Now, of course, at this point, yeah, you can pull out and pull onto the adjoining property and turn around. But I don't think from a planning commission sense that you should assume that the adjacent property owner is going to continue to allow that ad infinitum. I mean, it seemed like to me you should be looking at it as if there's a brick wall there, and that if you try to pull out and back into it, that's it. You got to go one way, and once you pull in, you got to turn around, come back out, and there's not room enough for 2 cars to pass there, much less if you had a fire truck. And when you put a bar in there, bars, no matter what they are, have incidents. Incidents imply the need for fire trucks, police cars, and whatever. And, you know, when you've only, it's a recipe for disaster.
Question for staff, would it, why would this property not be required to come into compliance as to the parking lot?
The situation regarding the distance between that existing front building and the property line to the west, the area of concern regarding the restriction of access has been a situation that's been in place since the 80s. While the proposed use for the bar increases the number of spaces required, that additional spacing is going to be shared with the property owner to the north, who at this point has agreed to participate in the PUD. But the access width and the constriction there has been in place for 30 years.
But not the parking requirement.
The number requirement.
Because there was a variance granted in 2007.
But it was allowed to expire.
So currently we don't have a variance for parking.
Correct, because that particular use did not go into play and utilize the variance.
Can I ask a question about that historic approach to this problem? If this gentleman who represents a business that a lot of this traffic now is going in and out without his being part of the PUD, and that creates problem for his new business that he'll be opening soon, I imagine. I'm just going to take that leap. But if there's a PUD application, doesn't it start again all over? And so whatever was allowed, or I know the zoning, I get that. The land has a zoning attached to it, that nobody is saying that a bar can't go in. But as far as, if you read the traffic engineering comments, I think, and we have a traffic engineering representative, I'd like to hear that take on it, because I think that's what's being articulated by the gentleman who has the business and that's going to see all this traffic coming and going, because feasibly they cannot go out unless they go through his property.
The way I was looking at it is a kind of a combination of what Margaret said and what the citizen has said, is that the existing parking up near Airport Boulevard, I just hate to say I disregarded it, but it's existing. I was focused on the new area, and I was treating it like it was a wall because I don't see anything else on the plan that was submitted. And so my concern was, once you get to that last bend and go into that new parking, you're basically in a loop. There was no arrows that allowed you to get back south, unless maybe you went all the way around the building. But my concern is where the two angled parkings meet in the southeastern corner of where the new parking is proposed. And that's likely right where they're coming down through the adjacent property, which is unclear at this time.
The parking that's angled in front of what's going to be the bar, okay? I'm assuming I have that correct. The applicant, is that correct? Do I have that right? The bar is going to be that? Yes. Okay, right there. Thank you for the pointer. Appreciate it. If those parking spaces were removed, then there would be two-way in and out from there. And is there enough parking with the rest of the PUD? I know that's not right at the door of the bar, but does that then prevent anyone else that's in that footprint from having to go in and out of and around this gentleman's new business that he's trying to improve?
We can try and crunch those numbers to see if compliant parking would be provided with eliminating those spaces. However, what is before the commission is this: it does not provide any cross-access beyond the bolded line, and consequently, for any adjoining property owner, they do not have to allow that access passively. They can place bollards in place, put bollards in place to keep cross-access from occurring.
So if we don't, do we have a map with more of the businesses that sit in front of this? So, okay. All right. Wait, what's in white? Is that still an R1? You gonna tell me?
Yes, ma'am.
Lovely. Okay.
As is the business.
And that is the strip club?
That's right.
Oh, okay. How'd that happen? And right next to it is the building that you are reinventing, correct?
The one that we're developing is just to the left of
Yes.
the adult club, right there. The one that's shown vacant.
Right.
And at the point, once we spend $18,000 on resurfacing that parking lot, there will be bumpers or fence or something along the perimeter, so there will be no access through our property to the car wash or any of the property behind it.
Okay.
So if there won't be any access and fencing, then what is your concern with?
I'm sorry.
I was
I'm not
confused. I
understanding.
thought your original point of contention was that you didn't like that access, cross-access.
Well, right now, they're driving right across us, and what I'm saying is that when you develop the property the way it's talking about, you will be creating a traffic nightmare and adjoining property, not on my property, but as just part of it, of the whole area.
The whole area is dysfunctional. I mean, they're trying to make the best they can out of it, but what would, Captain May, what was your, as far as the fire department's view on having such a tight access, what is the fire department's view of this?
Fire code would see that new PUD and the property line is the only accessible point for the fire apparatus. So if you don't have 20-foot access to the property and through the property, then we would consider it non-accessible, and the fire code requires it to be accessible. The reason the fire code states that is because any future use of that property line can be changed at any time, and therefore if you allow adjacent property to be used for access, that access can be denied by the other party at any time. And so this PUD, if it's not 20 feet from the backside of where those vehicles are parked on an angle, if there's not 20 feet from that to the property line, then would be considered as non-accessible and would not approve
Do we
it.
have that? Do we have those numbers?
Yeah, question for staff. Margaret. Margaret.
She's trying to get.
Mr. Byrd, do you know the dimensions of the clearance from the parking spots to the property line?
In front of where the bar's gonna be, I think
there.
it's in the 24, 25 foot range. Front to the back of the required parking space. Yes.
But what about in the area that was pointed out earlier by traffic engineering?
I don't have one of my full-scale drawings that I can scale.
Might want to hold this one up so we get some better numbers.
Scale is 20 feet.
But that's the only way that people now can come in and out.
I think it's 31.
Needs to be.
Get rid of that parking. Don't let them park there.
I think they got 20 feet.
That's at submittal online stuff.
25 feet. From the back of the parking space to the west park.
We parked a car in one of those parking spaces, and it extended beyond the line of a parking slot. And this was just a typical SUV.
So I guess the idea of the fire department would be able to pull a truck straight in, do your job, and then be able to back straight out. 'Cause it doesn't look like you're going to be able to make it around the building to me.
Well, it depends. If it's farther than 150 feet, you have to have an official turnaround. But because we can circle the existing building in the back, we would see that as long as that gives us access all the way around that existing building.
But
Next to the car wash, we could pull around that and pull out. We're not going to back out on April Boulevard.
what about where, in that pinch point that Mary Beth had pointed out earlier? She's pointing to.
While he answers that, let me say this. The 25 feet is actually from that dotted line behind the parking spaces to the west property line. From the back of the parking space to that west line is 31 feet.
Mm-hmm. So people can come in and out of there, even though people are going to be backing out into them. But that's civil matter.
Parking, it's only 24 foot required for a two-way drive out.
I'd hate to be trying to pass somebody going in and out of there in an emergency situation. That's personal.
But you're going to take care personally of how you manage your traffic and flow your traffic so
Right.
that this is not inflicted on you.
Anything else?
That's your recourse.
Okay.
Yes. Oh, excuse me. Anyone else want to speak?
Anyone else here to speak against?
One last question for you, Mr. Bird. What is while we're looking at dimensions, what's the dimension from the east side of the building to the east property line?
East side of that building to the property line is about 1 foot or a half a foot.
No, probably from
The back building.
Oh, at the back.
Jerry, it's
There's an
20,
easement back there, there's a green area back there. I drove around that. I had pulled in and went down by the car wash and circled all the way around on the side.
Okay, okay.
Jerry, it's 20 feet 6 inches, according to the plat.
20 foot what?
6 inches.
20.6.
Okay.
Or 26, which one?
20 feet 6 inches.
That
Oh,
looks
from
kinda
the
narrow
side of the
right
building
there.
you're talking about? Yes, okay.
And the fire department minimum requirement is 20 feet.
That's true, and in light of the pinch point that's been brought up, where the 25-foot and 100-foot western side of that goes, what we would probably do, since we're looking at the front building largely for the access here, is the existing building in the back as well considered part of this plat? Is that what's?
Yes.
So both structures have to be accessible?
Yes.
Well, then, yeah, we'll have to have access all the way around that building, so.
Okay.
We could have access by going to the right and all the way around and coming back in. No, we don't like that parking where that little jog is, where the 25 feet is, because you're gonna have cars jacked up all in there, and we're not gonna be able to get by it.
Mm-hmm.
But technically, we'd have access by pulling to the right, coming up the east side and around the back side to the building. Are these change of use for both of these buildings?
I'm sorry?
Are these gonna be a change of use for both of these buildings?
At this point, the application is driven strictly by the change in use proposed for the front building.
A bar.
Okay, well, there'll probably have to be some water additions too, but that's not y'all's concern. But anyway, we don't like it, but it meets the code.
Should the parking lot there on the far east parking lot in front of the back building, is that something that need to be looked at as far as eliminating that one to give a little more clearance to make that turn around the building?
Or even for automobile maneuvering on the site?
Yes, it should still be looked at. I mean, if you saw the site plan I did and the arrows that you did, you get in a loop. I mean, you are literally driving in a loop because you can't get out unless you choose to go all the way around the building. So it's not something that can't be overcome. Some people don't realize that you actually take up more space with an angled spot than you do with a parallel
Straight
or
back.
perpendicular spot. So we'll work with the applicant as is one of the recommended conditions of the approval.
Any more questions by commissioners? Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Next item, 401 Cochran Causeway, Cowles, Murphy, Glover and Associates. Recommended for tentative approval. Is the applicant present? Are you in agreement with staff recommendations? Applicant is present and in agreement. Is there anyone else here to speak for this? Anyone here to speak against? Thank you. New group applications. U.S. Machine Subdivision. Ms. Latham is recused. The PUD Subdivision and Zoning recommended for tentative approval. Sidewalk waiver recommended for denial. Is the applicant present? Are you in agreement with the recommendations?
Tom Clark Gear, Latham & Associates, representing the applicant, 3901 Spring Hill Avenue, 36608. We are in agreement with the PUD subdivision and zoning staff recommendations, but I'd like to make a few points about the sidewalk waiver application. This property was annexed, I believe, in 2008, and the business development was largely developed at that time, and we requested a sidewalk waiver when we did an addition in 2008 as well, and granted that waiver. Nothing really has changed in that time frame with respect to the sidewalks on this property and the neighborhood in general. But the staff's recommendation is to deny the sidewalk waiver. I'd like to point out that this development is largely developed, probably 70-something% developed. And as I said, it was mostly developed when it was county property, so there's not a single sidewalk in there. And I know this planning commission in the city is reluctant to grant sidewalk waivers, but in this case, it seems like the chance of having a completed sidewalk circuit in this area is virtually nil. And so we're asking you to do just that. The applicant would like to speak also about this same topic.
Robbie Hochstetter, U.S. Machine Services, 600 Ziegler Circle East, Mobile, Alabama. We have some safety concerns about the sidewalk due to us being a manufacturing facility. Right now, we have a sidewalk that goes from the side door to Sellers Lane. We have Alter Point across the street, which is a rehabilitation center. We have to keep the door locked to keep the tenants out of our building for their safety. We're concerned that if we put the sidewalk all the way around the front, it's going to take them around to where the 18-wheelers are entering the building, entering the property. We've got a lot of truck traffic in and out. We have forklift traffic within the property. In the past, before we did the addition this time, or in 2008, there was a gate which went to the laydown yard on the cellar side. We had problems with the neighbors coming in that side, coming in the back of the building. I've even had them stop me in the laydown yard and tell me they were the security guard. They were from across the street. So we're concerned about making access basically to the high traffic area. Dealing with situations with that now, even to the point where they come up the sidewalk to the front of the building and get cigarette butts out of the butt can. And more concerned about continuing it on around where, like I said, they're in harm's way. So.
Okay. Any questions by commissioners? Anyone else here to speak for this? Anyone here to speak against? Thank you. We'll take your comments under consideration and deliberation. Thank you, sir. Next item, 1857 Duval Street, Houston Street subdivision. Recommended for tentative approval. Is the applicant present? Are you in agreement with staff recommendations? Applicant is present and in agreement. Is there anyone else here to speak for this? Anyone here to speak against? Thank you. Next item, 1751 Bolts Lane, subdivision and planning, recommended for approval. Sidewalk waiver recommended for denial.
Good afternoon, I'm Darrell Russell with Moss, 4725 Moffett Road. We are in agreement with the recommendations and are okay with the denial of the sidewalk. However, we would like to ask for reconsideration of the required dedication along Bolts Lane. That existing street has a 35-foot right-of-way. Approximately 30% of it has been improved and developed as a road. The remainder is undeveloped as a road and actually stops at the entrance to our gate to our facility. The dedication of the additional 12.5 feet in the right-of-way would put the right-of-way line into our detention pond on the southeast part of our property and would also encompass probably some of our underground utilities. So for those reasons, we would like consideration of waiving that dedication requirement.
Which item number was that?
That would have been under recommendation item number 3.
And are you requesting that one be removed or just changed?
That be removed, that it stays as a 35-foot right-of-way.
What's staff's opinion regarding that concern?
We would want it at least a setback so that in the future, if anything occurred along Bolts, that there wouldn't be any additional structures that would be within that area.
How much of a setback?
From the center line of Bolts, we would want 25 feet.
From the center line of Bolts or from the
proper line?
Center line.
Okay.
Yeah.
That would be acceptable to us. And that pertains only to any additional structures, not anything.
That is correct. Nothing existing.
Right.
Mr. Russell, is there, because it says right-of-way varies, is the full right-of-way there up to your access point?
It does not. It's not at this point.
Okay.
That setback won't give you an issue with your retention pond? Well, I guess your retention pond can be in your setback, not a structure, so disregard that.
Any other questions by commissioners? Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I believe everyone has a copy. We did have one neighbor that submitted an email in opposition.
So noted. That closes the public session. We are now entering into deliberation. beginning with item number 1, Lone Oak subdivision that's requesting a 1-year extension.
Move to deny the extension with a note placed on the extension that will, likely extensions will be unlikely granted.
Second.
Second.
I'm sorry, we'll try that again. Move to approve the extension with a note stating that future extensions will be unlikely granted.
We say that all the time on 1-year ones. Just saying.
The motion
Second that
still,
motion.
the second. Properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes. Item number 2, extension recommended for 1 year, 3740 Latigo Road. Is there a motion?
I move we approve the extension for 1 year.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes. 31 holdovers, 3100 Cottage Hill Road, Excel School. Ms. Latham is recused.
Move for approval, subject to staff recommendations.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposes? Item passes. Item number 4, 956 Mobile Street, planning, subdivision, and zoning, all recommended for tentative approval. Is there a motion?
I'll move to approve based on staff recommendations.
Second. I'd like to add to that we adopt the findings of fact
Yes.
as presented by the staff.
For the planning approval, yeah.
I don't see any-
There's none on this one.
I didn't hear the comments, I'm sorry.
We'll adopt the findings of fact for the planning approval as presented by staff. Will that be accepted into the motion?
Yes, I accept the, let's see,
I second.
to approve the findings of the fact.
Okay. Properly moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposes? Item passes. Item number 5, 3726 Halls Mill Road. Both PUD and subdivision are recommended for approval.
Move to approve based on staff recommendations.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Any discussion?
Yes. Are we able to accept some but not all of the findings of fact with the approval?
Yes, those are just staff recommendations like anything else.
I guess I would like the commission to consider really just the letter A, letter E, and letter F adjusted, rather than the reason it gives, to maybe change it to because no new public infrastructure must be constructed to meet the applicant's needs.
Are we still,
But what page are you on that?
are we on 5?
Please.
Number 5, page 8.
Could you restate?
I didn't see findings of facts on this one.
Yeah, it's right here.
The PUD section.
We got
It's on page 8 of the agenda.
then the
Oh, I see, okay.
And what are you requesting that the verbiage be? Again, please.
I guess really, at minimum, to delete C and D
delete C.
and change F to not the reason stated, but instead of allowing existing business to function more effectively. I don't think that's really accurate or applicable for that one. I think if we go to some of the ones that were mentioned in other applications, because no new public infrastructure must be constructed to meet the applicant's needs, that would be more appropriate for this particular situation.
Just to understand, what's the purpose of changing this? I mean, it doesn't change the approval or anything, does it? So.
Oh, well, I just think that they were a little bit different than some of the other ones we've seen. Like, for example, C promotes the objective of efficient land use because developing the lot is better than allowing the property to remain undeveloped. I don't know that that is really the case, or something that we've stated before as a finding. And then also the idea that it promotes environment by planting additional frontage trees, that doesn't seem to be consistent with the idea to preserve and protect as urban amenities the natural features and characteristics of the land. So those just didn't seem valid here. So, and if we can approve it with legitimate findings of fact, I thought that might be preferred.
Taylor, to answer your question, the purpose of the findings of fact is that the City Council has requested that we adopt findings of fact, so when planning approvals and PUDs are appealed to City Council, they can have some factual basis upon which to decide whether you are arbitrary or capricious.
Got it.
There's no magic criteria other than following the criteria in the zoning ordinance. You can add to it if you want.
Does the person who made the motion accept the change in recommended verbiage?
I'd like to discuss that a little bit. I'm not sure we really have recommended verbiage yet pulled together to call it a real amendment to Taylor's original motion. So I'd like for us to discuss a little bit and come to some findings of fact based on Ms. Andrews' questions. And then we'll just hash it. We're going to have to hash it out. There are findings of fact.
But that's contradictory. I see where about that we're going to keep the natural features, and then we're going to say that enhanced landscaping will be added. It's really not natural. I mean, it's a nice thing to have, and we have a code for that. But I think I see where you're going with this. It's
right.
Like we're just ticking off these things and like hoping something will stick as a fact. And
well, I think several of the facts are valid. It's just, really C and D, I think it doesn't promote those objectives at all, so I don't think we would need verbiage there. And for F, changing it to similar verbiage, like in agenda item number 18, where they have, because no new infrastructure is required. Or in 17, they have, as no new public infrastructure will be necessary. Something like that for F, I think would be more appropriate.
Is there a motion?
The motion currently is that it's
to adopt the findings of fact as written.
Yes, and it was seconded, and so.
Okay. If the person that made the motion does not want to amend the motion, then we need to vote.
Yes.
What Ms. Andrews is asking, there's nothing legally wrong with it. It's just what y'all want to
do. Who made the motion? Can we just withdraw that and have Keena make the motion?
Move to approve based on staff recommendations with the modifications to the verbiage that Ms. Andrews indicated in the findings of fact.
Which includes removing C and D and amending F to state?
To state, as no new public infrastructure will be necessary.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes. Item number 6, 7 Garter Trace was withdrawn. New subdivision applications. South side of US Highway 90, Blast Coat Research Product Subdivision, recommended for tentative approval.
I move we approve, subject to staff recommendations.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes. Item number 8, each side of Liberty Drive East, Newman Crossing subdivision, recommended for approval.
Move to approve based on staff recommendations.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes. Item number 9, Taylor's East Ridge subdivision, 1159 Taylor's Drive, recommended for tentative approval.
Move to approve based on staff recommendations.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes. Item number 10, 156 South McGregor Avenue, Perry Place subdivision, recommended for tentative approval.
I'll move to approve based on staff recommendations.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes. 5715 I-10 Industrial Parkway, recommended for tentative approval. Is there a motion?
I move we hold over to August 16th. Didn't the
16th.
applicant agree to that?
No, that's the next one.
This
That's
one's
the next one. Sorry about
recommended for
that.
approval.
This one's recommended for approval.
So moved.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposes? Item passes. Bluffs at Cypress Creek subdivision, Phase 2, recommended for holdover to the August 16th meeting. I'll make the motion.
Second.
That.
Properly moved and seconded for holdover until August 16th. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposes? Item passes. Next item, 7901 Half Mile Road, the retreat at Half Mile subdivision, recommended for tentative approval. Is there a motion?
Move to approve based on staff recommendations, changing item number 2 to a 100-foot setback
It's 100 or 75?
from the center line.
Yeah, okay.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes. New planning approval. Item 853 Dolphin Street, Dagny Development. The record reflect Mr. Atchison and Ms. Latham recused. Recommended for approval. Is there a motion?
Move for approval, subject to staff recommendations and the findings of fact.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Item passed. New plan unit developments. Balloon Park subdivision, 4658 and 4660, recommended for approval.
Clarification before we make a motion on this one. There's some issues with the parking lot. Does that need to be addressed with traffic on the PUD before we make a move on this one?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what staff may think about how much change is too much change that y'all would want to see it versus what we could do administratively.
I think there's some serious concerns that the fire department has that we need to try to get worked out and hashed out prior to making a decision on it.
But I think the fire department did say it is within their code requirements.
They said they didn't like it.
Well,
They said it was technically okay, but also this is a PUD, so we have the opportunity to
Make it better.
make it better.
Correct.
I would like to recommend to hold up. I think that knowing the intense use of a bar, what'd they say, that building was 10,000 square feet? Okay. I really think it would be great if the staff technicians would try to see whether there was a way better than what was proposed for circulation and for the parking plan, and to assure that patrons coming in and out of this facility can get the services that might be required. And I'm glad that we do know the use. I think that tells us something about what we can expect activity-wise. And how many parking spaces were shown on this application as configured now?
It was either, what we read was either 63 or 65, which is the required number. They're
Like right down to the science, right, I bet?
Pardon?
Right down to the science with
Exactly.
adequate
Yes.
handicap?
Yeah, they listed the existing and the additional, and it was totaling the amount required based on our reading of the plat. Of course, since it's a PUD, and if you wanted to remove one or two of them, as was discussed at that tight corner, you could do that.
Would that trigger them needing a variance for
God, yes.
a reduced amount of
It's a
parking?
PUD, so
We can allow them a lesser amount of space.
I think it's worth our while to take our time and get this right. I mean, we don't want to hold the applicant up by too much, but this is an area that's obviously ripe for development, and we need to make sure we get it right and make it look good as well. So I second the motion to hold it over.
And then the demolition would be something I would hope this planning commission would go with the staff recommendation. And we could let the applicant know that that is something that will be, nobody can say what's going to happen at the next meeting, but in all intensive purposes, that would be gone, which would then perhaps make for some kind of parking changes as well when that's leveled and moved out.
Just so the staff will understand, I know she's probably about to ask you this question, I'll ask it for her. In this holdover, what is it you want the staff to discuss with the applicant? The moving or relocating or reducing the parking spaces?
I would not favor a reduction when we know what the use is, especially in its early, when it first opens. I mean, I don't know what they're planning, and I don't know I know we don't get into that. I know it's zoned appropriately, but in being candid, I would hope that the applicant would want to give their patrons the best environment, and if it means that not all those parking spaces can be there for two-way egress and ingress, and the building in the rear that's not got its intended use, is that zone B2 or is that a higher use? Because it was a warehouse for a distributor, a balloon, that's how it got its name. I sort of remember that. And they've been gone a very long time. It's a mattress place in there now.
I believe the request is a site plan that depicts the dimensions and the traffic flow.
Right, just make sure the fire department can sign off on it as presented.
To what meeting do you want this held over to?
I would give the staff enough time that it doesn't rush them because they have other things to do a month, not the next one, but the following one. Okay. So the August 16th would be the holdover.
Okay. So do we have a motion and a second?
I would recommend that we at least ask the applicant if that time frame meets them as well.
Yeah, which meeting are you talking about? August 16th. August 16th. 2 meetings. 2 meetings.
That is two meetings.
It is 2 meetings.
What did I'm sorry, we didn't hear.
August 2nd. 1 meeting.
I would hope there'd be site visits, perhaps, with equipment.
So the motion and second is for August 16th?
I think he's
Is the applicant okay with that?
Yeah, I think he said he is, yes.
Okay.
The station is close by.
So August 16th
22
is...
is right there. They could almost walk with the hose.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
So, where do
Item
we
held
decide,
over
the
till
16th?
August 16th
Thank you.
meeting.
Appreciate it. That's a good one.
Car wash needs to go away, too.
Next item, 401 Cochran Causeway. Recommended for tentative approval. Is there a motion?
Is that with the trailer?
Yeah.
I have a question about which one are we on? No, that's the Blakely Boat
Move for
Works.
approval, subject to staff recommendations and supporting of the funding of that.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes. New group applications. 18,
Oh, no, wait a minute.
Ms. Latham recused.
Excuse me, I'm really sorry. Are we on 16? Is that the number we were just?
17.
Okay, but did we just vote on 16? Because I did have a question, and then I thought we weren't on that one.
We voted on.
Yes, and I'm not
401.
going to ask you to change your vote, but can I just ask the staff a question about a trailer on this facility, and that's what triggered the application?
That is correct. A trailer is allowed as an office in commercial and industrial zoning. It is a building, it is a structure, and as stipulated in the ordinance, more than one building on a site triggers the requirement of a PUD.
Okay, and they did not get those other ones approved, so they have to come and get building permits? And those are buildings, not trailers, correct? Are they trailers too?
Trailers require a building permit from the city of Mobile.
Right, but the existing buildings, where it says existing buildings, there was a note that said those were never approved. So is that an opportunity for the city to come out and make sure they make fire, I mean, do they have to make some kind of fire code?
You have
and sprinklers and things like that in industrial?
Okay, for a trailer, while it does require a building permit, because engineering's going to look at the area that it creates an impervious surface, fire's going to look at distances to hydrants and so forth, but the unique situation with manufactured structures such as trailers is that they are regulated and licensed by the state of Alabama. While we can regulate where they are located and distances from property lines and other structures, the structure or trailer itself, that box, if you would, is completely and entirely regulated by the state.
Okay, I get, okay, that answers that question. And first of all, I didn't think we let trailers other than construction trailers. But if I look at this site map right here, and it says there are 3 existing buildings, I'm assuming these are the existing buildings we're talking about. Were these put on the site without city permit approvals?
At the time the report was written, we did not see a permit for it, but you also have to consider we have new software and it could have been issued via the old system.
But will this be an opportunity for the
Yes,
city?
ma'am.
That's
To
clearly
obtain the
stated, and the
permit.
applicant knows this, correct?
They agree, yes.
Okay. And you're not talking about those other existing it looks like there's like I would call it a strip thing. And then you
And
have these-
modular buildings can be, trailers can come in pieces and be joined into one. And again, those are regulated by the state.
Okay, all right. All right, and I'm sorry I didn't ask when it was a line of discussion, I apologize. But, okay. Lovely.
Item numbers 17 or 18?
17.
17. No, now we're on 17. Now we're on 17.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, can we take these items separately since we have some differences on them?
Yes.
Okay.
Item number U.S. Machine subdivision.
That was the sidewalk was mostly the thing, wasn't it?
Right.
Yeah.
Item A, subdivision is recommended for tentative approval. Is there a motion?
Move to approve based on staff recommendations for the subdivision.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Subdivision approved. Item number B, the PUD, recommended for tentative approval. Is there a motion?
Move to approve based on staff recommendations with the findings of facts listed.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Any discussion?
Yes, I would request that the commission consider excluding items D and E from the findings of fact for approval.
Let me get staff's opinion on those two items.
Those are presented to the commission to help guide in their decision, and it is up to the commission to decide what to retain or amend.
And these are all just, again, they're reasons, and we can look at one of those reasons by itself, and that's enough justification for making the recommendation. So changing the wording of one of those, of the many reasons is not really changing things that much. Ms. Andrews, could you list the two again that you were concerned about?
D, regarding the promoting the objective of environment, and E, regarding promoting the objective of open space. I don't believe that this particular case promotes those things, so I thought it just best practice to exclude them.
I agree.
Who made the motion?
I made the motion. I'll change the motion to remove those two items, D and, was it D and E?
Yeah.
D and E.
Motion amended. Is there a second? The second amended? Second. All right. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? B passes. Item number C, zoning, recommended for approval. Is there a motion?
Did we do the sidewalk waiver?
Going, that's next.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. Move to approve the zoning based on staff recommendation.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Item C passes. Item D, the sidewalk waiver.
Move to deny the sidewalk waiver request.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Any further discussion?
I do want to ask real quick, do we consider the safety? He mentioned being an industrial site and the coming and going of 18-wheelers and commercial traffic. Is that ever a concern with, I guess, does this fall under traffic or zoning?
Another question for staff, and we brought this up in the past. I know the group probably struggles with some of these, and this is probably a perfect example of one that we do. Has there been any more look into a sidewalk bank? I mean, I hate to keep asking that question if it's something that's a closed chapter, but that would be something I think we would love the legal departments to look into to see if that is something we could consider.
I'm not aware of any discussion that's been had with the city staff or any of the departments about that.
Okay, thank you.
Good idea, but
yeah, I mean, I think, you know, there's certainly scenarios, you know, where maybe it doesn't make sense, common sense, but it might be required to do it where.
Set it up just like the tree bank is a good idea.
Exactly, exactly. If that's something that can be considered, you know, by the legal department or departments, I think that would something we'd like to hear guidance that this group could adopt.
Can we make an official request of the staff as the commission to check into that to see what will be involved with the mayor's office and see if we can make that happen?
I mean, certainly specifically with this site being industrial and, as pointed out by the engineer, all the development is in around it, so we don't see necessarily an opportunity where more sidewalk is going to be added soon. I just think it's something we should consider as far as the safety of adding this site across the one industrial part of the area with no clear path towards more sidewalks in the area to make it connected to anything.
I mean, I know like in areas like on the Beltline where, you know, we've required it because you could see someone come in there and do some demolition and redevelopment, but in this area, you don't see this happening anytime, you know, where there is going to be a chain of sidewalks, because I just don't see this area being redeveloped where someone's going to come here and start demoing this to build new and then connect these links.
There is, Ziegler Circle is primarily developed, as you can see on the vicinity map. However, along Sellers, there's a lot of development yet to occur on this side, extending eastward to Cody.
Can the sidewalk just be approved for that Sellers Road?
You can approve
Like
a
pieces,
portion
parts
and
of it?
deny a portion.
Because it was more for the circulation and the safety that the applicant mentioned, but the frontage is going to be well, no, that's really not the frontage.
As far as safety is
but-
concerned, I mean, I agree with Mr. Ballas that the area is not likely to be developed, and it's not likely for the adjoining properties to be, you know, to be anything done to those in the future anytime soon. But safety reasons, we've looked at and improved sidewalks and required sidewalks in areas adjoining, you know, high traffic, you know, roads and streets in the city. So I don't think safety is a real concern here.
Well, we have approved sidewalk waivers in industrial areas, though.
But this is really kind of, I don't know that this is quite, quote, an industrial area based on the surrounding use.
Is this the first I-1 in this area?
You have, as the applicant stated, and as you can see on the vicinity map, the Ziegler Circle was developed prior to annexation, and while it was annexed in, it was rezoned as part of the study associated with that annexation as B3. However, you have quite a mixture of development along Ziegler Circle. The contractors that are there have storage yards and are more industrial in nature. This site has already been to the Board of Adjustment for variances for uses. And then, you know, staff recommended, as did the commission, for this property to go to industrial use, industrial zoning.
We have a motion and a second, I believe, right?
The motion on the table is to deny the sidewalk waiver. Is that
Correct, that's right.
Any more discussion? All in favor to deny the sidewalk waiver, could I have a show of hands?
Aye. Oh,
Okay.
I'm sorry.
All in favor who are against denying the waiver, please show your hand. She's,
How much you couldn't vote?
Yeah.
So, 5, 4, 8, 5.
what was the count? I didn't.
5
to
deny.
4 to deny.
Okay.
Okay. Sidewalk waiver is denied. Item D. Next item, 1857 Duval Street. All sections are recommended for tentative approval, so we can take it as one.
Move to approve based on staff recommendations.
Second.
Hold on, can I add, we discussed removing item number 3 and exchanging that with...
That was on,
That's the next one.
that's on
We're not
the
on-
next
oh,
one.
I'm sorry.
That's the next one. Okay.
Properly moved and seconded. Any discussion?
Yes, I would ask the commission consider removing letter D from the findings of fact for approval. I don't know that the addition of a cell tower promotes the objective of environment necessarily.
I would agree.
person who make the motion accept the amendment to remove item D from finding of facts?
Yes, move item D.
Okay. Probably moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes. Next item, 1751 Boats Lane subdivision.
I need to recuse on this.
Can we take all three of these separately, please?
Yes. Mr. Doyle is recused. We'll take them as separate. Subdivision, Part A, recommended for tentative approval. Is there a motion?
I'll make that motion, removing item number 2 and requiring the 25-foot setback from the...
I think it was item 3.
Excuse me, removing item 3 and requiring a 25-foot setback from center line of Bolts Lane.
Mr. Atchison, that was, it's 50-foot setback from the center line. 25
Sorry,
feet would get you.
50 from the center.
Yes, thank you.
Wait,
Is that in the planning section or the subdivision?
So,
We're taking one at a time.
Subdivision.
that's planning.
subdivision then.
It's in the subdivision.
So I'll second that.
Properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Subdivision part passes. Item B, planning approval. Is there a recommendation upon review finding of facts?
Move to approve the plan, PA on it, based on staff recommendations. I think this is where we need to change item number 3 to the setback, correct? Not in the subdivision? Okay, so changing item number 3 to the setback from 25 foot from center line. 50 feet, I'm sorry, 50 feet from center line.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Item B passes. Planning approval.
They want a waiver too.
And item C, sidewalk waiver.
Move to deny based on staff recommendations.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Sidewalk is, waiver is denied. That concludes deliberation. Is there any other business? Meeting adjourned.
I just had one, we don't have to get into it.